It is generally incumbent on us to be able to create a coherent account of the reality that we see around us. The information that we have coming in through our senses, we have to be able to make sense of and form a kind of predictable model for us to be able to continue doing the things that we're doing and building upon what we already have. Now, you might think, well, okay, that's pretty obvious. You know, I mean, you've said it in a fancy way, but that's a very obvious thing that even a child understands. And that's true. And it is in light of this basic necessity of our ability to function in the world that we have to make sense of Joe Biden surpassing 80 million votes in the last US presidential election. This makes him the most popular candidate in all of human history. He smashed Trump, who only got 74 million, who himself had smashed Obama in his peak of 69 million, and it really has to be explained. I mean, just the 2020 election itself, according to The Independent, more than 156 million people apparently voted in 2020, which is a turnout of more than 66%, which shattered a century-old record for the share of eligible voters who cast ballots. This really has to be explained. Now, it could be that Joe Biden ran a lightning campaign that electrified the masses and really made them think that Donald Trump had done a terrible job. They flocked to his banner and they voted in overwhelming numbers. But anyone who was paying attention to the election campaign saw that that wasn't what happened. Joe Biden couldn't collect a crowd, let alone fill a stadium, unlike Donald Trump. He kept putting a lid on his campaigning at before 10 o'clock every morning and essentially did nothing for the final week apart from 2 appearances on the final weekend. Whereas Trump was out pounding the ground everywhere, doing these enormous rallies, and in the final day did something like 5 rallies in the one day in different states. So Trump was working very, very hard. So how do we account for Joe Biden's phenomenal win? Well, 30% of Democrats think that the election was just stolen. And this is according to a Rasmussen poll that was about a week ago now. Nearly half of likely voters, 47% in total, thought that the election was stolen from Trump. Joe Biden's problems, the poll showed significant partisan divide on the issue. 75% of Republicans believe it was very likely or somewhat likely that the election was stolen, but 30% of Democrats thought it was very likely or somewhat likely that it was as well. So that's a huge number of people on both sides that think, actually, what the results that have come in do not square with my account of reality. I can't explain Joe Biden getting these phenomenal wins, and we'll talk about more about Joe Biden's phenomenal magical victory on the podcast later today on the other channel. But they can't explain, without assuming there has been some sort of cheating going on, how Joe Biden achieved this, right? But the important thing is that we have to be able to come up with a convincing and plausible explanation, because if we don't, what we're saying is that our model of reality doesn't map on to reality. As in, we are just sat here with unexplained phenomenon that we just don't know what to do with. And this could quite well lead us to disaster. And I thought, because I love classical history, I'd give you an example of how this happens and what this looks like. Because this is something that has happened many, many times throughout history. So if we go back to, say, ancient Greece, we go back to the Peloponnesian War, Athens and Sparta at war, These people didn't have a scientific model of the world as their worldview. I mean, they believed that Helios pushed the sun chariot across the sky, and then Selene pushed the moon chariot across the sky during the night, and this was their model of the predictability of the day and night cycle. But this means that you don't have any way of explaining when this cycle doesn't happen. In the case of, say, an eclipse, you have to resort to superstitions. You have to start behaving in strange ways that are actually counter to your own interest to try and grasp a kind of a thread that will lead you back to this predictive model. And this happened to the Athenian general Nicias after failing to conquer Sicily after being sent there from Athens. The Athenians had many advances, but they had many reverses, and eventually retreated to a port to sail away and leave the island, because the expedition had been a failure. Most of them were still alive at this point, so it was, an unsuccessful attempt at conquest, but, it wasn't the end of the world. But that night, there was an unexpected lunar eclipse, and Nicias, being a superstitious man, didn't know what to do about it. So he consults with priests and oracles, and they suggest that they delay for a month until the next moon for whatever reason. But this is a terrible decision because in the meantime, the Syracusan forces, who have been rallying to attack the Athenians, realize that the Athenians have paused because of the moon, attack them, defeat them, and then eventually kill them all. And the Athenians die in a horrible, horrible manner, a lot of them just being openly slaughtered, a lot of them being sort of starved to death or dehydrated in a quarry in the middle of the summer. It's really quite a harrowing account that we're given. But the point is, the lack of accuracy in Nicias's mythological worldview was the direct cause of not only his personal downfall, but the death of tens of thousands of his countrymen. He couldn't map his worldview onto reality, and destruction was the result. And that's a concern, because if you are not accurately mapping reality, you can't make accurate predictions. And if you're not making accurate predictions, you don't know what might be coming up, and you don't know that that might not be dangerous. So it seems that we need to find a plausible and convincing explanation for why Joe Biden is the most popular presidential candidate in all of human history. Again, what does it mean for the future of democracy if we can't explain why Joe Biden won in such a convincing manner? If we can't understand just the very nature of our fellow countrymen, the people who make up the democracy around us, and we can't understand why so many of them voted for Joe Biden, like what does that mean? What does that look like in 10 or 20 years' time? Could be that we're completely unmoored from reality, or it could be that Joe Biden just cheated.